Hey, welcome to Shop Talk. I'm Brandi.
This is James, and we talk about all things related to cross-cultural workers and mental health.
Great, we're glad you're here, and welcome to Season 2. We made it to Season 2.
Yeah.
Yay. All right, welcome to our podcast today. Super excited to have a counselor that I've been familiar with and I've known for several years here in the area where we live in Germany. Her name is Paula Wong. Paula is a Malaysian Chinese therapist who trained in Australia and has lived the past 12 plus years in Basel, Switzerland with her husband, Ben, and their 2 children. Paula covers a broad range of issues in her counseling practice, including anxiety, depression, family issues, grief, trauma, crisis management, and conflict resolution. And this is just a sampling of the things that Paula is able to cover and has covered in her counseling practice. Through her work, Paula holds an unshakable hope for healing for both individual and relationships. I love that, Paula. I think that's why so many of us do get into counseling, is because we do have a hope that things can improve, that you can rebuild, you can learn new patterns of living. Something else you put into your bio that's not related to counseling is that you're a coffee snob. And so I appreciate that. Just to get us started, what's your favorite form of how to make coffee?
Oh, as long as it smells really good. And the aroma hits you when you open the door, then you know it's good. It doesn't really matter how it's made.
So what I hear you saying, Paula, is that you like our Senseo coffee makers that we use in the counseling offices at BFA.
No. One student didn't listen to me. I said, that's disgusting stuff, don't touch it. And that student almost puked.
Oh.
Really?
Yes. I was like, I did warn you, but no, of course you had to figure it out on your own, but that's okay. It's just that this is not my office, and I don't want to clean up, and I don't have time to clean up, so please clean it up.
That's also a metaphor for counseling, right? Would you just listen to me?
So Paula, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, I gave a little brief intro there, but I'd like to know a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved in counseling, and just what led you in that direction, and also what led you into working with cross-cultural workers.
I didn't really choose it. It kind of chose me. Mm-hmm. You have all these people in the corporate world, and basically they are spotted by agencies. So I was kind of spotted by one of my, by the head of department for the counseling department, where I was doing a postgrad diploma in movement therapy.
Okay.
Because some of the subjects overlapped, and I did a lot of theory classes with Dr. Barker. So he basically made it possible for me to stay on. But I did have cross-cultural background because I was a cross-cultural worker in Nairobi before, because I couldn't do the Malaysian version of the get married picket fence, dog, maid, and 2 cars. And I said I had to go do my thing. Then came back and realized that I was far better doing people work than working with machines, which is all the IT stuff. I was doing quite a bit of media work where I was based in East Africa. And so went back to doing student ministry, campus ministry. And then because of my experience overseas, they asked me to pioneer international student work in Malaysia. Because of what happened with 9/11, a lot of the students couldn't go directly to the US and Canada. They were so much stricter. So then they would send the students to a country like Malaysia and do like a twinning program. They'll do 2 years in Malaysia with a private college or university, and then they will do the final year in the US or the UK or so on. So Malaysia then became a hub for international students, and a lot of international students who come from very conservative Muslim countries, because we are a Muslim country, but not as conservative. So the organization saw a need for international student ministry, and so they asked me to start it. So that was kind of my exposure with cross-cultural work and using what I knew into practice. And then when I went on and trained as a therapist, and I came to Europe, it just fell on me. Until today, like, I don't know how people got hold of my name and number, because I didn't really advertise.
Mm.
Just happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that speaks to the need. Like there's a lot of cross-cultural workers that are just desperate for somebody to help them in a language that they understand.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Right.
And somebody who's outside their organization because there's safety in that. And this is the huge problem, right? With a lot of organizations, you have the global care department or segment of your organization, but it's still within the organization, and it's necessary to have that. At the same time, it's not exactly foolproof in terms of safety.
Right. And I think that's such a great thing that you can provide for people, because I know that just seems to be in the back of someone's mind, you know, when you're a cross-cultural worker and you're talking to someone in your organization, it's like, who are they going to tell? Like, I know they say that it's confidential, but like, is it really confidential? And so I think you just give people that gift of being able to be real without having their walls up or wondering, like, who's this going to get back to?
Yes.
Right.
To digress for 30 seconds, how long were you in Nairobi?
Not very long.
Oh, okay.
Because 1.5 years, and the word member care didn't exist when I was there. Like, I never heard this term before. So I just think my life would have been very different if there was such a thing, or if I knew, okay, if you need help settling in, you could go and talk to these people, or if you want to process something, or you just needed a one-off session, it would have made such a difference. My team was very small. It was mainly Americans. I learned so much about the Americans just from my small team.
I'm sorry.
And just being in Nairobi as well. Thank you for apologizing. I appreciate it. At first, I thought they were just wonderful because I could talk about anything and we could connect. Then I realized we couldn't go deeper.
Yep.
And then I wondered, because I was the odd one out, I wondered what was wrong with me, you know, with what I was feeling, with what I was thinking. And I mean, of course, in retrospect, I look back, that is cultural. Americans connect very easily, but they don't go deep.
Right.
So true.
When you work with cross-cultural workers, what are some trends you see, or things that people tend to struggle with more, want to work on more?
We did well to stumble upon grace, this whole concept of grace, with the Protestant movement coming out of, you know, our history and the way Christianity grew over time. Of course, we didn't stumble upon it. The Lord allowed us to stumble upon it and discover it. And it just gave fresh look at everything we believed in, right? Evangelicalism has its own form of legalism that is not often addressed in churches. And I don't care how, you know, more charismatic, less charismatic, it doesn't really matter. They all have their own form of, okay, what you need to do to fit in. So maybe you need to be more rah-rah to fit in a certain type of setting, and maybe you need to be more like understand your Bible, know how to read your Bible inductively, and so on and so forth, to be kind of accepted as okay. And so we all have our own forms of what it means to fit the shape. Organizations take this on.
Yes.
And to some degree, they have to, in order to create structure. But with more structure comes these binds, these bonds. And every organization has to re-evaluate and look at what that looks like for them. In every generation has to do this, I think. And that's fine. But I think what is left for the individual and impacts the individual is that this is where I come up with my two broad trends that I see. So we all have mixed motivations because we are broken. We live in a broken world. We have wounded places. And so whatever we do, even if we have genuine, authentic desires and a genuine faith, we can't help but have mixed motivations. So you have the first group of people in this who want to do this type of work and be a cross-cultural worker, that I would call them the overachievers.
Explain that a little bit more.
They probably did their education in like more the top-notch universities or colleges and did really well, and they're good minds, they're good thinkers, they learn to strategize well. They probably went on to do postgrad degrees, even some of them, add on the PhD on top of that. And so they really are pretty driven in themselves, right?
Yes.
So that you have that lot. Then you have the second lot, those of us who need to be needed, the rescuers. And then you have those who have both, because a lot of us have both. We want to achieve and we also want to rescue others. Oh, gosh, that is the right setup for burnout.
It is. Because when is it going to be enough? Like it's also can be like a drug, when you are rescuing people and helping people. It's great. It's kingdom work that matters. But when is it? It's hard to turn off from that.
Yes. And often I hear the shoulds, the musts, the haves, so often. And then I kind of say, maybe we read a different Bible. My reading of scripture is quite different. We call into these things, and there are these guidelines, and where we are stuck, we ask for help and we ask for grace to enter those places, so we can eventually get to where God would like to have us. And if that's a place of forgiveness or a place of contentment or a place of acceptance, so be it. Grace doesn't force.
To me, this ties so much with people I see who are completely driven by a fear of failure. And it could be this first category of achievers, like, I'm not going to do enough. Is not a message that I see in scripture, or even the need to be needed. There's this sense of fear of failure that's so powerful. How does that tie in?
The root of that is the main struggle with insecurity, right? The search for significance. That is a gem of a book way back my time. Not maybe your time, James.
My time too.
They're probably on the 3rd edition.
And so we all have our insecurities, and they all look different and they present differently. So yesterday I was speaking to a missionary in another country in our part of the world. She was saying, my problem is, I can be very selfish and self-indulgent because I'm into perfectionism. I can, muck around and do things and have it presented perfectly. And I said to her, but that's not your problem. That's a symptom of something else. And I said, oh, wow, you're really hard on yourself. She said, really? I said, yeah. I said, but it's a symptom of that. Why do we need to be hard on ourselves? Because if we do anything less, it will not be acceptable. And so you push yourself to be perfect and to do it right. And what does perfection look in God's kingdom? It's impossible. That's Jesus Christ. That's about it. And we're not him. We're called to be like him and imitate him. But we know we will never get to that level of perfection until we reach where we're meant to reach past this life.
I remember for me getting to this point where I realized it was sort of an aha moment for me that I had this idea that I was working myself out of a hole with God, and doing cross-cultural work was part of me working myself out of a hole, and I couldn't do it perfectly enough. Anytime I had a thought of like resentment or frustration with the work or frustration with the culture, I felt like I went down deeper into the hole. And just the aspect of living with grace and with the God who says, I see you and I'm delighted in you, that wasn't at the forefront of my mind. So yeah, unpacking that baggage took a while, but it's pretty freeing.
Just to add on to another layer of this insecurity, you have a lot of leaders at top leadership level in different organizations doing cross-cultural work, and they appear very confident. But if there is that deep insecurity, you do run into danger then of becoming controlling and authoritative, but not necessarily in a seen way. right? Because we're all meant to be like humble and do things a certain way and listen to everyone, and so we know how to do all the right things. And I think that is really dangerous in this type of work that we are talking about, because then it becomes harder to call out something that is not obvious. You have a leader who's so full of himself or herself, it's easy to call it out. You have a clear wrongdoing, a clear sin, it's easy to call it out. But if you have these roots of insecurity and it comes out in these insidious, subtle ways, you can't put a finger to it. It's a bit like sexual harassment for women. When is it really something, or when is it, oh, you read wrongly into that touch, or into that hug, into that friendly kiss? It's scary, dangerous. This is why I think sometimes the corporate world, when they have HR and they have very clear regulations, I think, oh, sometimes I'm jealous of that world, because our world is so convoluted, everything overlaps. We're meant to be family, we're meant to fellowship, love each other, and we recreate families in our organizations. But then everybody then reenacts their own family dynamics, including the broken ones, into the organization. And that's why organizations then can blow up. But nobody's calling it out.
Well, you are right now,
Yeah.
so that's really good.
I can call it out because I work alone. And that's why I love to work with an organization, but then, that it will come with some things. You have to give up some things. Yeah.
It does.
I mean, it does sound like just a cycle of organizations go overseas. They have all these different people. They really drive and encourage. I mean, what you were talking about in the beginning, these kind of similarities, or they're kind of pulling people who are similar in certain ways, whether it's beliefs or structure or the made up boundaries on how they do things. And then they really encourage them to be close, and they have to be family and community and work colleagues and all of this stuff. And then, of course, because they bring their own, broken family systems into it, well, then this system gets really bad, and then it goes horribly, and then those people leave, and then this broken system goes into other systems.
Yes, exactly.
Yikes.
How do we, then once we're in the system, be able to differentiate and call it for what it is, and then rise above that and extend what we need to extend to one another, and allow people to leave, but not in a bad way. Leave having acknowledged what needs to be acknowledged, and so releasing them with permission to leave and move on. It's very difficult. So that's one danger. The other danger is, especially for those who are driven and the overachievers that we talked about, the perfectionism and so on. The danger is we do what I call the holy trinity of CBT, but in the Christian world. I made it up yesterday because for fun. So you got the justification, the rationalizing, and the spiritualizing. You spiritualize, you rationalize, and you justify. And it's all about, let me work my mind. I need to push on. I need to move forward. Then I take the right first, and then I feed it to my brain. And yes, there is a place for this, for sure. But if this becomes the sum of who you are and what you do, then you're in danger.
Yeah.
Because then that's the legalism that I refer to, because it becomes a salary. Like, I can do this. If I repeat this mantra and I look at these verses and I dwell on them and I have a whole list, and then we justify that, we're called to suffer. We rationalize that the Lord sent us here. There was a calling, or, there was a very clear opening. And then we spiritualize. And can you see the Holy Trinity of CBT?
Oh, yeah.
So I have a question then. How do you help people and people you're working with to move past this? Because we have these patterns and these beliefs so ingrained in who we are. And so when you're working with people who come to you, what helps them to see these patterns to help them move forward?
I'm very post-Freudian in my thinking, which may not sit well, because as soon as some people hear the word Freud, they go, oh my goodness. That's like the hands and feet and the mouth and the brain of the devil, in the world. Having said that, we won't be talking about mental health if Freud never existed. He introduced the idea to us.
Mhm.
And I am very, very biased towards analysis type of work. But analysis work is quite different. A lot of cross-cultural workers, when they come and they can, and especially if they're not, or even if they're on crisis mode, if I put them on the couch, and we do that every week, people start to go into those places and begin to observe themselves in those places and put the dots together and think about the way they think, observe their own behavior, observe how they respond to their own behavior, observe how they feel towards it. It's quite a different type of work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think this is offered much in the settings that we are familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Well, there can be this push toward, and it's not always bad, but like the solution-oriented approach of like,
Yes.
What's the problem? How do we fix it? And there are situations that's helpful, but what you're talking about is people taking the opportunity and the time to look at themselves and look at their patterns.
People work without any clear agenda or goal other than I'm just going to explore who I am and why I am and why I do what the things I do and put myself in this process. In fact, everybody who goes on sabbatical, I think this would be a great thing to do. Not churn out another thesis or research paper or, comparative study type literature.
I think especially when you view it in light of with the Holy Trinity you were talking about, because that stuff just is so deep-seated. It's not a easily solvable thing. If there was a way to think their way out of the justification and think their way out of stuff, they would have done it, which is kind of the CBT model.
Yes.
But some of those things are so deeply rooted, like it goes back to the shoulds and musts, like I must be here because God called me to do this, or I must be here because if I don't, no one else will. I mean, some of the stuff is so deeply seated that it takes time.
Yes, and it's all the stuff under that iceberg,
Mm-hmm.
that 90%, the unconscious that is not known. And how do you help that emerge from the waters? Now, if you're going to be sitting face to face, that is your 10%, your conscious brain.
Mm-hmm.
Not the deeper stuff that comes out in your dreams at night and comes out as you rattle on and on about your fantasies, your things that pop into your mind and so on and so forth. It's totally different. And this is why you had a question here where you asked, what are practical ways for ongoing workers in cross-cultural settings to evaluate and care for oneself, right? I think this is a good place to address it. It is to enter into that process when it's not the right time, inverted commas, meaning you're not on crisis mode or you're not having a problem per se. Of course, go get help when you have a problem. But the best work, and I tell people this all the time, is done when you are actually in an okay place. And that's when you've stabilized, you're feeling more or less grounded, and you enter this process. In fact, that's what I did because we could never really afford it, when I was a postgrad student. And then when I graduated, it was at that time encouraged that you do this. Now it's compulsory. Mm-hmm. But at that time, it was just encouraged. So I said to my husband, how do you feel about spending this money and putting myself through this process for 1 year? He said, go for it. And I had a psychotherapist who had experience, and I'm Asian, right? So I needed somebody older than me. And I put myself on the couch for a year, and all my stuff came up. Things that I was not necessarily planning to talk about or thinking about because I was not in crisis mode then, right? And dreams and stuff and all kinds of things. And at one point I remember, this is hard. So I remember doing 2 sessions sitting up. And she just looked at me and said, the next time you come in, you're back on the couch. It's her way of saying, I understand you want to be in control, but this is not really going to help you.
A question I have is, like, when is a cross-cultural worker at a non-crisis enough place to engage in that? Because living cross-culturally can and often is stressful enough that a lot of the people I'm encountering with, and to be fair, they're only coming to counseling when they're in crisis. So that's problem number one. But so much of life is just more difficult. And then the further that culture is from your home culture, potentially the more stressful it is just to engage in normal life. So
sometimes, depending on the person, some people, I put them on the couch immediately because they're talking too fast, their mind is just overthinking things, and it just slows down the pace and slows down the work. And I take them through a process of relaxation and so on. So we work through the crisis that way, either face to face or on the couch. And once they're feeling a lot better, then we continue going into the deeper levels. Some people don't want to do that. They just go like, right, all my goals are met. And I do say, because sometimes it's a financial reason, I do say, you've actually met all your goals. Should we talk about how you want to move on? And I will say, I think there are some deeper layers to be explored. And those who see a need for it will invest in it, and they have benefited. And interestingly, in this season, I had a whole bunch of people come in who are not on crisis mode. And who have done some work with their global care people who are trained counselors, but they're away on home assignment. And so they say, I know there's more to be done. And I want to do that work with you. So these people ask, right, next week you come in, you're going to lie down and we're going to work from there. It helps when you already have some kind of known trust. Because somebody has referred them to you, and that helps. And then they do that work every week. I mean, think about what a luxury this is. Every week you come in and you just take off your shoes, you lie on the couch, and you just talk about anything for an hour. And every week you can get to do that. You can talk about anything and everything, spiritual, non-spiritual, sex, whatever. Go for it. And then you learn so much about yourself. The classical way was 4 times a week.
Gosh, that's wow.
Which is not actually a lot, because if you think about it, it's only 4 hours a week.
But the experience, while healing and very helpful, can also be so intense and draining too.
Yeah.
What would you say? So we have people listening to this in different parts of the world who maybe don't have access at this point to be able to participate in something like this. What would you say to cross-cultural workers, what that would be helpful for them for their ongoing self-care and just awareness of how they are and how they can live sort of healthy, integrated lives?
COVID opened up this whole world to us. We talk about podcasts, we talk about Zoom, and I'm really not into that. I prefer like people to come in and see me, and that used to be my condition. Like, you need to find a way out here so we can meet online, but eventually you need to find your way out here, and we do like intensive. So 6 to 8 sessions over 4 days, something like this. But COVID forced me to be more flexible. And so I did that kind of work that we were just describing online.
Okay.
I say, well, take me to your favorite couch or to your bedroom, put me somewhere, and we start. And it actually worked.
Okay.
I was surprised. So then I realized, oh my goodness, I can do this with somebody who lives, in the middle of Latin America, which is a fact for sure. Couldn't find a single English-speaking therapist from the same worldview. So found me through the grapevine. And that's what we did every week. I've never met her in person. So it's possible. And I think now you will find resources available who are open to that.
Okay.
How would somebody know if they're ready for that?
Yeah, actually not everybody can do that. So remember I told you there's those overachievers. There needs to be a certain amount of intelligence to be able to do that process, and overachievers actually do fall into that category really well. Some people, good old fashioned face to face, you do that solution-based type work, maybe try to go a little bit lower. I think a good practitioner will be able to tell, especially if you have a broad range, and will be able to say, you need something more, you need something different, you need more than what I can give. And I'm not trained, for example, in EMDR.
James is.
And I do know that it's very successful in helping people who have gone through trauma. And sometimes I feel that's what people need. And I would say, I think you need to go and look for EMDR, therapists to help you. If you want to come back and do some other type of work, you can come back. And some people, that's just what they need.
Okay.
I'm very biased to my approach, of course, but generally, I think every person who's a cross-cultural worker, you want them to go in healthy or to go through that experience healthily. So to have these type of resources available to them as an organization, it's really important.
What would you say, like, if you were to meet with a group of like trainees or people getting ready to move overseas and work cross-culturally, what would you say to them, or how would you encourage them to prepare themselves, like just mentally and emotionally for living cross-culturally?
I think actually we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of organizations do quite a good job of having these orientation programs. Right? That's what I'm beginning to learn and see. Some better than others, and they take you through debrief and so on. But I think what is lacking, which is why I came out with my program for families in transition, and I think you've heard about it, Brandi. Like I work with families to help them go through that transition, is that how to get families to talk about what that transition means to them, including the children from whatever age. That will be like tailor-made for that specific family, and helping them process and debrief, as opposed to like a program we put them through and all the kids are in one place and all the teenagers in another place, which is great. I think it's great that you have that. But that specifically tailor-made one-to-one attention, where one therapist has a understanding and sees where the different needs are, instead of one person for the kids, one person for the teenagers, one person for the husband and wife. And oh my goodness, that's so much resources. Most of us don't have that time and energy and resources available. Yeah. So I think that's the missing part, because actually organizations are quite good already at trying to think ahead. What can we do? Or they send their people to debrief through a different organization that is trained to do that.
Listening to you talk about highly motivated people and driven cross-cultural workers, people who want to be helpers, and like, what can we do to help people start looking at themselves and start looking at what brought them here, maybe some unhealthy patterns that might be in their lives?
That's a very hard thing you're asking. I think there are so many things involved in that. It's seasons of life. Some people are just not ready to do that work. Sometimes it's about timing. Sometimes a crisis does bring a person there, and then you start the transformation process or the pathway to freedom. And sometimes specific retreats, I think, do address some of these issues. Now the whole spiritual formation and spiritual direction and some of these things are coming back into the mainstream, that actually are from our forefathers way before the Protestant movement began. So you have some of these seeping back through the mainstream, but still there's a lot of stigma and hesitancy and around this. That opens up a lot, because when you look at contemplation and reflection and staying with feelings and embracing that as part of you, you cannot help but open that up to look deeper, because you are saying, if I'm feeling this, it's okay, sit with that feeling and see what it brings you to, which is quite against everything that we grew up with.
It is.
You know?
I think especially with cross-cultural workers, there's this tendency to push down our feelings or think that our feelings are betraying us, betraying like our work or what we're doing. And it's like,
it's partly theological. What has been
Mhm.
drummed into our head that the heart is deceptive and you cannot be trusted and so on and so forth, which is all true. So, but it's not balanced by a holistic view
Mm.
of creation, in my opinion.
right.
Maybe at some point we probably should go to the marriage part, which is one of
Yes.
your big.
I'm so interested. I want to hear from your perspective, just because I think living cross-culturally has a huge impact on marriages.
Yes.
And I do marriage counseling, so that I see it. And then I think often I find in our communities, there's many marriages that are cross-cultural. So people from, I mean, all marriages are cross-cultural,
Yes.
but some are more so than others. And those are the ones I'm thinking
That's
of.
right. That you want to hear about marriage and the impact of cross-cultural living on marriages. And I'm going to take this broad version.
Do it.
Cross-cultural workers, not just in the NGO world, but also in the corporate world, because I've seen both. And I see a lot of similarities. Those who enter into marriage and then decide to go overseas, the cross-cultural context is really like a pressure cooker. If your marriage is resilient and strong and you have good building blocks in place, when you go into the pressure cooker, you're not going to crack.
Mhm. Mhm.
The crisis becomes an opportunity for the marriage to strengthen and to build on what is already there. And it is an opportunity for couples to connect in a way they've never connected before. So the strength of the marriage would determine how the marriage is in the cross-cultural context, i.e. the pressure cooker.
Mhm.
And it reveals what has not been worked on. So it reveals the cracks and it reveals the strength.
Mhm.
So it's a bit like COVID. People say, "Oh wow, are you working so much more because of COVID?" I said, "No, I'm not working so much more because of COVID. I'm working so much more because COVID has given people the context where their stuff is now coming up in a more obvious way, and perhaps they have the time to stare at it in the face and realize, I don't know what to do with what's coming up."
Right. So the stuff is there.
Yes. So
You were just able to just ignore it a little bit better.
Yes.
Mhm.
So
Right.
basically a cross-cultural context is what COVID has done to a lot of us. It's to bring out in the open what the cracks are and what we need to keep working on. And if the marriage is not strong to start with, then it will come up far more in the cross-cultural context. And sometimes it's impossible to see and evaluate people based on whether their marriage is strong or not, because people are going to give you the right answers when they go through job interviews.
Yeah, they will, because they want to do they want the job.
Correct, because they're overachievers, remember, or they're
Yes.
rescuers. So they all want to go out there. So they will ace the interview process.
Yep.
Yes.
And also, like in your home culture, in your home context, your marriage might be working okay. And so it can work fine for where you are. You don't even realize yourself, or it may not be that obvious to anyone. Like you're not purposely trying to hide it. You're just fine where you are. And so then the things come up once you move cross-culturally.
Yes. But maybe those things would come out at some point later in life, because life tends to throw you a curveball, and
it does
reveal those cracks irregardless, and it might come later. So often what I see is couples are stuck in the first stage of their relationship development, which is usually you have one, this is again broad strokes, who is conflict avoidant. So that person is generally friendly, and keeps, the boat looking happy, sunset, sunrises, all these things. Or there could be a lot of inattention. And then you have the other spouse that is hostile or angry, and it comes out in two ways: the overt aggression, picking on things and having big fights, or passive aggressiveness. So most couples sit there. In fact, I would like to say all of us do it at some point. That's like the first stage where you've not really differentiated in your marriage. Yeah. And then let's say if we go with my theory that all couples go through stage 1 and they get stuck there, and then you take this couple in a cross-cultural context, whether it's a first world cross-cultural context or third world, you will have problems. Or the same couple stays in their context and crisis happens, they will have problems.
Yeah.
Probably the cross-cultural context, it's a faster way of getting there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
It'd come up like year 15 normally, but because you're cross-culturally, it's year 5.
Yeah, so great.
Yeah. So it can be such an opportunity to connect and grow in ways you would have never done so that early in your marriage.
Yeah, there really is this opportunity for depth, for you to explore like a deeper connection with your spouse. It can be pretty hard too.
Yes.
But worth it. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you think of a couple sitting in that first stage, and they still manage to make it work and still experience joy in a marriage. And then they go to a cross-cultural context where one spouse loses their role. Their job is not as important, or they're busy raising children. That exacerbates the situation. Right. So organizations probably have 2 responsibilities here. One is to help the couple look at their expectations and what is realistic and what is not. Because some spouses are okay to be the one like raising the children, seeing to those things, and they thrive in that. And the other thing organizations need to do is to create then roles and opportunities for supporting spouses. Yeah. And it needs to be somewhat defined. There needs to be clarity. So couples who struggle, you can hear one of them will say, I don't really know what I'm doing, or I can do this, or there's some admin to do and it's not very interesting. Or so can you see that brings tension in the marriage too, because we came here, we're both rah-rah, but then you get to do all the exciting bits.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of times the supporting spouse, which often is a woman, winds up not doing as much language learning, not doing as much kind of intentional cultural adaptation. So the one that's working not only gets the fun of whatever work they're involved in, they're also miles ahead in local relationships, which is important, and miles ahead in ability to communicate and navigate and develop deeper relationships. So the one who's mainly taking care of the home is, way behind in terms of language and culture. And yeah, there just winds up being this huge gap.
Well, it can be, sorry, that just flipped up. It can be difficult if there's a kind of an atmosphere and an ethos on the field where the roles are more well defined, where couples aren't allowed to work it out, themselves of like, actually this is going to work for me and this is going to work for you. And I think when they have the freedom to be able to do that and talk frankly, with each other and with their team about what works, it's more helpful.
And this goes back to what I said originally. It would reveal the strength of the marriage or the cracks.
Yeah.
Right.
Like how open can I be with my husband? So like when we made that big move from Australia to here, we both agreed that in 2 years, if I'm not happy, that he would be okay to leave his job. And we would all move. This was really important, that this was not on me to make it work, and it was not going to be my fault that we both agreed to this. If after 2 years I cannot integrate and be happy in this place, and I'm seriously miserable, we would reevaluate and move. And that's okay to do. Now, how many couples are willing to have that conversation? When you have organizations that do like 5-year terms and and you have to commit to those things, and then you do all the logistics, to make sure you have the funding and so on to get to a certain place. That's tough.
Yeah. And there's no easy out.
Correct. Know about your mental health and what it's going to look like in 3 to 5 years. again, this is something you cannot predict. I say sometimes you just have to get there, and then you realize, oh, I have these struggles. I am struggling with this or that or so on, and I'm predisposed to A, B, C, D, E, or our marriage is actually not as good as I thought we were. And, so we don't know until we're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So that ongoing ground support is really important. I think it's always useful to have an inbuilt existing mentor. This is something I thought through when I was thinking about this podcast. What helped me? So I didn't have to start a kind of relationship from the ground up in a new place, because, that takes a long time to build that trust and the alliance and so on. But I had someone who already was there for me and still there for me, and became like that person I could lean on and my sounding board. So a kind of built-in existing mentor within the organization or out of the organization who you can keep tabs with.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
It's been delightful to talk with you.
This is fun. I was telling Brandi, how come her life is so much fun? She gets to do this on a regular basis.
Right? We like to laugh a lot, so that's a part of it.
Yeah, we do. So it's a lot of fun.
And do you still see a lot of clients, James?
I do. I'm also connected to a group called Scentwell, which is based here in Malaga, Spain.
We're gonna have our team meeting there no matter what in February, right?
That's right.
No matter what. So we'll sneak you in, Paula.
Yeah, just get me to do something. Give me a reason to go, and I will be there. Even if you want me to do like free lie down on the couch for 5 leaders, I'll come and do it.
Okay.
Nice.
But
take care. I'm gonna
thank
leave.
you. Okay.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, it's good to see you, Paula.
Bye.
Oh, Brandi, your life is so interesting. You get to do all this stuff. Mine is like boring in comparison.
Your life is fun.
What? She gets to do this? This is so much